I'm Scott Sommer. I've been practicing holistic medicine for more than 20 years. Our philosophy with this podcast is combining ancient wisdom with modern research to help you protect and heal your family so you can thrive in today's world and the challenges that we're faced with on a daily basis. Hey everyone, Scott Sommer here. So excited to talk to you today about the difference between drugs and herbs. So, people get this confused all the time. So in this topic, discussion, we're just going to talk about, where drugs come from, where do plants come from, how long they've been around. Now, what's the difference in their interaction in the body? And then how we can deal with each one when there's a purpose for one and the other. And then we'll just conclude as to what you can do to better understand herbs versus drugs in your body. So let's get started. So let's talk about plants for a second, because we know that plants have been around since the beginning of the creation of time. Since creation of the earth, we know that plants have been here. And so it just took man a while to understand what the plants were for. And so what I love about Asian medicine, which is one of my degrees, as well as nutrition, is that, herbs are really different than food. They have a different quality. You wouldn't sit down and eat a bowl of garlic, Maybe some of you would, but you might lose your neighbors in the process. But the point is that herbs are much more powerful. They're much more pungent. They're more concentrated. They've been around since the beginning of time. And so they have constituents in them. And usually herbal medicine, we use combinations of herbs. We never use a single herb. Like, the media kind of gives us bits of information about ginkgo as being good for the memory and the focus. But they also don't talk about all the other properties that herbs have. Like ginkgo is incredible for circulation in general. And when you combine ginkgo with gotu kola, together it's amazing for healing the body. Like if somebody had an injury, like the ginkgo part of the herb formula would actually help with circulation and, helping with tissue repair. And the gotu kola creates new tissue and new collagen. So then you add something else to that formula. As a master herbalist that I am, I know that herbs, the synergy of herbs is much more powerful. And it's important to understand that it is a very powerful, plants and synergy are much more powerful than just eating a salad. And so that's important to understand. Okay, so that's kind of the history of herbs. And the other part to the herbs is that, man had to actually, in Asian medicine, had to really hunt and gather herbs and understand, observe how they were grown, like mushrooms, like the shaga mushroom is an amazing natural mushroom for the immune system. And they would look at some of these mushrooms and how they grow in hardy environments, like hundreds of feet up in the air on a tree and bark, in these damp environments, So how they grew, where they grew, and Siberian ginseng, as an example, is a very hardy herb that actually gives us a lot of energy because it's grown in a harsh environment. So because of that, that plant has just really amazing properties to keep us alive and give us energy and stamina. And because the plant itself had to have a lot of stamina to be able to grow in a harsh environment. Now let's look at drugs. So 1/3 of all drugs actually come from plants. And so basically that means that, when they wanted to make a drug like aspirin, was kind of discovered through the Indians called willow bark. So the Indians, basically they would make this tea or chew on the bark of willow bark and it would help their headaches go away. So they had discovered this, through trial and error. And basically they knew that willow bark never failed. It would just get rid of their pain. So Western medicine began to do research and they found the active constituents in the bark. And then they made basically aspirin. But it never is quite the same because a drug is not the same as a plant. A plant has a lot of different constituents and phytochemicals, if you will, that are naturally occurring in the plant to help balance it so there aren't side effects. But, and we're going to talk about that in a minute. But a drug will always have a side effect. And why is that? It's because what happens basically is that when you take a drug, your liver will try to process that drug for the next 4 hours. So there's always a side effect because it's not completely balanced. It has a purpose. Some drugs are necessary if somebody absolutely needs insulin and they can't live without it. And we've saved, thousands and thousands of lives of people once we were able to produce insulin. However, when we rely on antibiotics and use them improperly, then we create superbugs. And so that's what I call a side effect, is a superbug. When we have MRSA in hospitals and staph infections out of control, and then eventually these drugs will no longer work on the human species. So these bugs, by the way, are becoming smarter than the human mind because they're constantly adapting and adjusting to what we throw at them. Eventually, we'll have superbugs like we do now at such a high rate that very few of these drugs will even work anymore, especially for infections. And what do we have most of our problems with is viruses and bacteria, and we have very, very little solutions to viruses. And more for bacteria. Fungal, is just very limited as well. So parasites are a real problem as well. So we have to realize the difference is a side effect is from a drug only. An herb would give us like a cleansing reaction or a healing crisis. And what does that mean? Something with the herb would be, give us some diarrhea, slight headache, or, something like that. But it's really more digestive in nature. And of course, you can abuse herbs if you take too many of them at one time, if you use the wrong species, and if you don't know what you're doing. So one of the herbal routines that I have in my own life is, for myself and my wife, is that I give us astragalus. So I really believe in astragalus. It looks like a tongue suppressor as an herb, when you see it in the raw form. But it's incredible for boosting the immune system and building your wei qi, which is your energy force or your energy field outside your body that helps repel disease and viruses of any kind. Bacteria, viruses, parasites. So that's something we include in our, herbal therapy each and every day. The other herbs that I really believe in is ashwagandha. So it's really great for stress, that's very, very helpful. And milk thistle is something I also use. So I usually take an herbal formula that has milk thistle. Japanese knotweed is also another great one. Ginkgo, astragalus. That's kind of the major herbs that I use. And I use a lot of eleuthero for energy and a lot of ginseng. So there's many different types of ginseng. Korean ginseng is one of my favorites. American ginseng and Siberian ginseng. But you need to make sure that you match the right herb to your body. And the greatest thing is once you find out what your problems are genetically and also where you are currently in life and which decade of life you're in, where your problems are, circulation or memory or focus or whatnot. And kava is another great one that I really love. Kava is like number one for anxiety. It's incredible. So these are the herbs that I use on a daily basis, and they really work. So at this point, let's conclude basically that we know that herbs are powerful. They've been around forever, for 5,000 years or more since the creation of the earth, and that they don't create side effects. But we do sometimes need to be aware that some herbs don't get along with some medications. And so as a master herbalist, I'm trained in this area. So for instance, blood thinners are something you have to be careful of because there are things like fish oil and ginkgo and different herbs that will thin the blood naturally. And so you have to be careful in taking those together. But make sure you work with an herbalist that knows what they're doing. Because unfortunately, most doctors that are MDs are not trained in herbal medicine. But sometimes they have lists of herbs that not take before surgery because they're concerned about you thinning your blood and interfering with the surgery and the anesthesia. And then, of course, it's okay after the surgery, but blood thinners are the biggest thing, and antidepressants like St. John's wort will interfere technically with the effects of the antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications. So for now, I just invite you to seek out more natural methods, look for those natural herbal therapies, get a better understanding of somebody who's a master herbalist to help you. Use more things like garlic for cleaning out parasites and boosting your immune system. There's some other great spices you can cook with, such as turmeric And cinnamon to regulate your blood sugar. Those are spices, are also herbs that can greatly help you. And also things like ginger will help boost your immune system and your digestion. So for now, be healthy, be well, and be happy.